Hi, and welcome to my favourite albums of 2021. Now, having looked at a lot of best of lists so far, they're all going to vary wildly. So these are my personal favourites. These are the albums that I played the most this year. Now, I don't know what yours are, but if you'd like to put them in the comments section, I'd love to see what you personally picked out as your favourites for 2021. And you know what? I'm going to find albums that passed me by or I didn't catch up on, and it's going to open me up to new music, and hopefully if you've not heard some of these albums, you'll go and explore them for yourself. So here goes. At number 10, Dinosaur Jr., Sweep into Space. This is the band's 12th album, and you know pretty much what you're going to get with Dinosaur Jr. It's going to be a great rock band making another great record. Rock, punk, hardcore, pop, what is it? It's Dinosaur Jr. Sure, it has echoes of the Ramones, the Stooges, Motorhead, Nick Cave, and many others, but it's Dinosaur Jr. It's their own unique hybrid. J Mascis takes mostly lead vocals with that whining low-key drawl, playing at that slightly out of its slacker character that he does so well. As a guitarist, he occupies his own unique space and delivers one mind-bending solo after another, as usual. Then we have Luke Barlow on bass and occasionally lead vocals, and Morph on drums. Both provide a fantastic, powerful rhythm section. I'd say Sweep into Space is probably their most melodic and upbeat album, happiest album the band have ever made. Well worth checking out. Number 9, Fat Pop, Paul Weller. While never quite scaling the heights of Paul's previous album, On Sunset, it is nevertheless a hugely enjoyable bunch of songs, expertly crafted songs. Songs that get into your head and don't want to leave. Soul, pop, funk, rock, and a bunch of ballads. It's all here. Coming in at number 8, Detroit Stories by Alice Cooper. When this album was first announced, I didn't hold out much hope. For me, Alice has been kind of going through the motions for a while now. Fair play to the man. You know, what is he? He's getting on. He's well into his 70s now. But I was a massive fan of Alice back in the day. Killer, School's Out, $1 Billion Babies, Welcome to My Nightmare. But don't expect Detroit Stories to break any new ground. But what we do get is, for me, Cooper's most focused album for many, many a year. The album is basically a tribute to Cooper's hometown and the driving balls to the wall rock and roll that inspired him and made the Motor City so famous. It produced bands like the MC5 and the Stooges, to name a couple. In fact, Alice employs former MC5 guitarist Wayne Kramer to lay down some blistering guitar and help recreate that driving rock and roll that made the Detroit music scene so famous. Alice Cooper, I wanted to make a real rock and roll record. Well, you certainly did that, mate. Number 7, Sobrock by John Mayer. I can't think of an artist that divides opinions like John Mayer, even amongst his own fans. It is said that the motivation behind this album was to confuse his fan base, to troll some of his audience, to go against everything he'd released up until that point. Who knows? Maybe that's a wind-up. But the result is a 10-track album that plays tribute to the songs John Mayer grew up with in the 1980s. And he does it right down to the cover with that fake Nice Price sticker on it. Heavily referencing Stevie Winwood, Toto, Dire Straits, Don Henley, he pulls it off. And he pulls it off magnificently. So if you want to step back into the 1980s and have a fun, hugely enjoyable record, have a listen to Sobrock. You know, it's nothing groundbreaking. I say it's heavily nostalgic, but it's an enjoyable album. Steven Wilson, The Future Bites. Apart from Jethro Tull, back in the day with a Passion Play, I cannot remember an artist or a band receiving so much stick for a new record. You would have thought, judging by the comments, Wilson had killed Bambi, or even he was responsible. It was all down to him for COVID-19. You know, people just tore a strip off him each and every day. All because he didn't do a prog rock album. It was shock horror, a pop album. Out came the garlic, the silver bullets, the crosses, but it's beautifully realised it was a classic modern day pop record, full of melody and invention. But I'm sure in a few months, when the new Porcupine Tree album is out, all will be forgotten. It never happened. But it's a great record, and if you want to see an artist at the top of his game doing something, if you want to hear an artist at the top of his game doing something completely different, stepping outside his box, like John Mayer did with the previous album, go and have a listen to The Future Bites. You might like it, you might not. Coming in at number 5, Chemtrails Over the Country Club by Lana Del Rey. Oh dear. When I covered Lana on this channel, out came the trolls. It was like being in Mordor. The Boo Birds. They came out in their hordes. Up until this year, I'd not really listened to Lana Del Rey. Just had it in my mind she was just another manufactured pop star. Until an old friend, whose judgment when it comes to music is always spot on, said, go and listen to her. You'll be surprised. Chemtrails was the first album I did listen to, and I was immediately entranced. Each song is like a mini movie, surreal and dreamlike. Every song's like a mini David Lynch movie. As Del Rey paints pictures of broken romances, broken dreams, the longing for a better life, all encased in sublime melodies and soaring vocals. And remember, this is a message to all the trolls, Lana Del Rey is playing out a character. That's not who she is in real life. And a message, a Christmas message, to all those trolls and the Boo Birds. And this is from the heart of my bottom. Coming in at number 4, United State of Mind, Robin Trower, Maxi Priest and Livingston Brown. Again, it's another album. When I first heard about this, I was like, no, that ain't going to work. You know, that mixture is not going to work. But I was wrong. It's all held together by the glue of Livingston Brown, who plays superb bass and does some killer work on production. You have Maxi's silky smooth vocals and Robin's deft restrained guitar, and they come up with a modern day classic. Think of those cool modern day soul grooves that Paul Weller mined through On Sunset, and then add in some echoes of Curtis Mayfield. Curtis Mayfield abounds in this record, while Robin Trower's guitar playing is extraordinary. Whereas maybe another player might have fallen into the trap of overplaying. Robin's playing is about as much of what he doesn't play, the spaces that he leaves, about what he actually does play. And you can see why Robert Fripp said Robin Trower is one of the few guitarists that have mastered all the bends and the wobbles. Number 3, Senjutsu, Iron Maiden. Now, if I had to pick a prog rock album of the year, this would be it. Over the years, Maiden have been leaning more and more away from metal and more into prog. So much so that parts of Senjutsu sound like they could have been produced by Jethro Tull. Metal Hammer described this album as an electrifying cinematic masterpiece, while Blabbermouth said that Senjutsu is a modern gem. Ultimate Classic Rock saying bassist Steve Harris seems to have fulfilled his ambition to turn Iron Maiden into a no-holds-barred prog band. Give it a listen. It is brilliant. Number 2, Declan O'Rourke, Arrivals. Earlier in the year, I saw Paul Weller talking about Declan and what an amazing songwriter he is. And Paul saying, if only I could write songs like Declan. Paul produces this album. It's sparse and bare. Just Declan's acoustic, occasional strings and drums, and Paul adding little touches here and there. Declan O'Rourke. You want to make something mature and evolved, so you naturally think you need to add things to make the end result sophisticated. The opposite is true, however. The more noise you add, the more you struggle to hear the space around you. That level of calmness and stillness has taken me a while to get in my recordings, but I think with Arrivals, I've achieved it. That calmness, that stillness, allows Declan O'Rourke's wonderful gift for storytelling to shine through. And like all the great albums from singer-songwriters, it's a record you can live in. You know, my friends, what life can do with plans. Fellow musicians were also generous with their praise. Pete Townsend saying, "Arrivals is a gem. Fabulous guitar and singing. I just love this album." Jerry Douglas said, "Declan O'Rourke is one of Ireland's gifts to the world. He's amazing." While Paul Weller had this to say, "He's in a field of his own. The roots are in the fertile tradition of folk music. But with that, he brings such a timelessness to his words and music that it is far, far reaching, beyond limiting categories." So, my favourite album of 2021, my number one at the moment, would be Imaginos Part 2 by Albert Bouchard. Now, the reason I say this is my favourite album because it's the album that I played the most. So to start, cut a very long story stroke saga short. Many years ago, the Blue Oyster Cult's manager Sandy Pearlman wrote a long, sprawling, epic, horror, science fiction story called Imaginos. Now there are a few videos on my channel which attempt to explain some of the concept of Imaginos. Now the Blue Oyster Cult as a band never fully wanted to embrace the concept of Imaginos. However, they did use Pearlman's storylines for various songs, often collaborating with Sandy on songs. They would use Pearlman's lyrics and the various band members would write the music. So throughout the Blue Oyster Cult's career, you got these snippets of Imaginos, and it was this concept that was tantalising. It was just out of reach, like a half-remembered dream. Now, when original drummer Albert Bouchard left the band, was fired from the band, way back in the 80s, early 80s, he did attempt to make an album called Imaginos. Now, that story is a saga in itself. Eventually, the album was released around 1987. Albert Bouchard made a string of demos. It was going to be his solo album, his first solo album, but the record company vetoed it because they didn't like his vocals. And eventually, it was released around about 1987. And it was released as a Blue Oyster Cult album. But it wasn't. Confused? Join the club. Now, last year, 2020, Albert finally managed to record Imaginos the way he envisaged it at the beginning and the way Sandy Pearlman wanted it, and it was called Reimaginos Part 1. This attempted to finally make the Imaginos saga clear, place the songs in the right order, and, like I said, how they were originally meant to sound. Somehow, Albert pulled it off and produced a magnificent album, an album that actually got into the Billboard Top 200. Now this year, because the album was so successful, we get Part 2, Bombs Over Germany. And again, Albert delivers a mini masterpiece. Taking in West Coast psychedelia, folk, classic rock, country, and even some rockabilly. It's just one great song after another, and it reminds me so much of those classic Paul Kantner albums we got in the early 70s, Blows Against the Empire, Baron von Tolbooth. It may seem hard to believe after all these years, but the Blue Oyster Cult originally didn't want to be a heavy rock band. They wanted to sound like the Grateful Dead, the Jefferson Airplane, the Doors. And if you listen to the way Albert's produced these songs, they very much fit in with those bands rather than the heavy rock scene. Anyway, Albert Bouchard has delivered a dark masterpiece, and I can't wait for Volume 3. So these are my top 10 albums from 2021. I'd love to hear what yours are. Please post them in the comments below, and take care, and I'll see you in the new year.